Aloha, kakahiaka. Welcome to the Committee on Energy and Environmental Protection. Today is Tuesday, it's Thursday. And Thursday, March 23rd, 9:31 a.m. in Conference 325. And I am Vice Chair Ellie Cochran, and with me is my chair, Nicole Lowen. Aloha. And joining us also is Representative Amy Peruso. Aloha. Mahalo for being here. And I will be running this meeting on resolution hearings. So thank you for that, Rep. Lowen. First up, we have on the agenda is HCR-3 and Department of Health here with had put in comments, and Hawaii State Association of Counties, HSAC, is here in support via Zoom. Are you here for testimony, HSAC? Not present. Okay, so, and we have another individual who just put in written on support, in support. So next item. Is
there anyone we missed?
Or is there anyone here not signed up to testify, wanting to testify at this time? Seeing none. Members, any comments?
Hi, I'm from the Department of Health.
Oh, Department of Health is here? Okay, go ahead.
Hi, good morning, Chair and Vice Chair and committee members. My name is Darryl Lum. I'm with the Department of Health Clean Water Branch. The Department of Health stands on our written comments, and I am here to answer any questions. And I'm sorry, I know I entered written comments only.
Thank you very much. And members, any questions or comments for Department of Health at this time? Yes, Chair Lowen.
Hi, Darryl. Can you just briefly just go through your testimony or explain, because you submitted comments, but when I read through the testimony, it sounded like concerns about this measure. Can you explain what those are?
Sure. So the Department of Health thinks that it's not prudent to issue or to propose rules right now for the functional equivalent criteria. First of all, our existing rules already allows us to issue NPDES permits for direct discharges or functional equivalent of direct discharges. So for example, we are issuing the Lahaina Wastewater Treatment Plant NPDES permit. EPA is actually reviewing it right now. And maybe by next month, we'll be ready for public participation. So we don't need to amend our rules to actually issue this type of permits. Another issue that we raised in our testimony is that the Supreme Court, their decision or the factors that they provided for consideration for the functional equivalent, it was not clear, and it was not criteria. It was just factors for people to consider. And the court admitted that they were confused, and they admitted that it would require future court cases to kind of clarify this. Another thing that we mentioned in our testimony is that EPA did not promulgate rules, federal regulations for this, and they did issue guidance on the functional equivalent considerations, but they rescinded that guidance after the public complained. And the last thing that we mentioned is that this measure talked about non-point source, and the functional equivalent only refers to point source. It's the functional equivalent of a direct point source discharge. So non-point source does not apply.
Great, thank you.
Department of Health, thank you for being there, and I completely concur with your comments in your testimony. Do you think this could be better, like methods could be developed with policies and procedures to be more effective versus in rulemaking for this, and perhaps get all stakeholders to the table to sort of work through that with all the different dischargers out there? Not just county, but others that also discharge?
I think that what may help is waiting for EPA to come up with regulations. We have been talking to them about this, and they did mention that there's some other permitting programs in other states, I think in the East Coast area, that are kind of working on this a lot. One of the issues that we're encountering at the Department of Health is once someone releases the waste into the ground, there's a big unknown, as far as what happens, and we're concerned that if we try to create criteria right now for the functional equivalent, we may do so with unintended consequences. For example, we may start bringing in homeowners or cesspool owners that may need NPDES permits. So I think if we wait for EPA to come up with their guidance and maybe even come up with regulations, then that might be helpful.
Okay, yeah, great. Well, let's stay in the loop on this one. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
If that is all, then we shall move on to our next item on the agenda, which is HCR-17 HR20. And here to testify in person is DBED Director Chris Sadiasu, or no? Is not here? Okay, not here. Next on to sign up in person is DCCA. Good morning.
Aloha and good morning, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Cochran, and Representative Caruso. Ganishin with the Division of Consumer Advocacy of the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs. We stand on our written testimony in support of House Concurrent Resolution 17 and House Resolution 20, and I'm available for questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you. And next up on Zoom, it's Hawaii State Energy Office, Mark Glick on Zoom. Are you there? Nope. Not present. Next is Hawaiian Electric, Darren Ishimura on Zoom.
Good morning, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Cochran, members of the committee. Hawaiian Electric stands on its testimony support. I'll be available for questions, if any. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Those are all the people signed up to testify. Anyone present wishing to testify at this time? Seeing none. Members, any questions? Yes, yes, Chair Lowen, of course.
Thank you. DCCA, Consumer Advocate. A lot of the conversation surrounding hydrogen, expanding hydrogen production in Hawaii has to do with also expanding geothermal, which I'm supportive of. But I guess from the position, especially of the consumers and the ratepayers, my thought is that if there's a further development of geothermal on Hawaii Island or any other island, that it would be in the most benefit of the people of Hawaii and the ratepayers to put it on the grid before using it to produce and export hydrogen. Do you agree with that? Or what do you think?
Generally, I do agree. I think there's still a lot to be done in terms of researching the possibility of using, say, geothermal energy to convert it into hydrogen. I think there should be careful consideration and doing that, if it's possible, looking to use it on the island of Hawaii first, because that's probably going to be the most cost effective. But I think depending on the research and the investigation into geothermal, if there's a possibility of creating more geothermal energy that might be used to convert to hydrogen, at that point we can explore the possibility of exporting it, maybe even to some of the other islands through a means that's also, again, cost effective.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the idea of getting Hawaii Island or whichever island's grid to 100% first, along with the other resources, not that it has to be 100% geothermal, but 100% renewable. And then after that, any excess production. I just think in terms of what would make the most sense for ratepayers.
Right, well, and I think an analysis of the costs to, again, produce more geothermal and then convert it to hydrogen needs to be examined to see whether or not it makes sense to focus on getting that one island completely renewable first. But if there are, I guess, revenue and profit opportunities that maybe exceeds the then cost, the evaluated cost to serve the island, again, there may be a balance there to determine the most cost-effective means and whether or not some of those revenues could help to finance other initiatives on the island that's creating the geothermal energy. But again, that's a future analysis that I think we need to conduct.
And in terms of the role of the PUC and DCCA, if there was like federal funding for a hydrogen hub and then some of that involved development of energy resources for the purposes of making hydrogen, would there be, where would the regulatory process kick in, or would it at all?
I think it depends on the entities that are receiving the funds and whether or not the utility companies are in partnership. I think there have been a couple of instances where, say, Hawaiian Electric had a partnership to look into, say, fuel cells. And at that point, the Public Utilities Commission had to review an application in terms of making available property on Hawaiian Electric sites to conduct those research. So if there is that interaction with the utility companies, then the Public Utilities Commission and our office may be required to review an application to make sure that it is in the best interest of consumers.
So I guess this is falling a little bit outside of your role as consumer advocate then, but I guess if there was concern about that, like the idea that if geothermal is being developed in a certain community or in a certain county, that it would, that development would most benefit the residents of Hawaii and of that area by first being used to reduce their electric bills. But there's no real, I guess it would fall to who the county permitting authorities. I mean, what role where would the state have authority over it?
That's a really good question, and I think we still need to work through some of those things, because to the extent that we're talking about a independent power producer that may expect to sell some of the energy to the utility company, certainly our office would step in and have a say in terms of trying to represent and protect consumers' interests. But if that independent power producer, say, is doing it on their own and none of the offtake is to the utility company, I think at that point most of the responsibility in terms of reviewing the impact on consumers.
If the offtake to the utility company is just to sell hydrogen as stored energy, would that then give the PUC or the DCCA kind of toe in the door to go back and look at like how you got there, or would you just have to look at sort of what was on the table? Does that make sense?
I think I understand your question, and to the extent that there's any agreement between a third party and the utility company, I think given the guidance in HRS 269-6B, we'd have to look at other factors, including the impact on cultural practices and environment. So we wouldn't be looking solely at just the agreement itself.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm not sure if you have this question, can answer this question, but I think it's mainly for HSEO. And they stated that this position will help demonstrate, the positive, will look positive in their grant application on the federal level, so which is super highly competitive. So are you familiar with where that is in the process and the grant proposal, if at all, and what's it intended for and all that?
Yeah, I apologize. I'm not aware of where all of those competitive grant applications are with the feds right now. I know I have had some discussions with certain individuals in Hawaii State Energy Office with respect to what they're trying to do to take advantage of the available funds from the Inflation Reduction Act as well as the IIJA. So I know we have applications before them, but I apologize. I don't have up-to-date information as to where those applications are.
All right. Well, thanks. I'm glad they're taking advantage and looking into that.
Well, hopefully, those funds will come to Hawaii because that'll help offset the cost for consumers.
Right. And this RESO will help,
hopefully,
assert
yeah,
that.
that's
Okay.
the hope, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you
for your time. All right. Any further questions and comments? All right. With that, we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is HCR-35, HR37. And first person to,
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
So
no,
fir-
go
first
ahead.
person is, signed up in person is DBED. Again, director, not here. Also, hopefully on Zoom is HSEO, Chief Energy Officer Mark Glick, or you, okay, yeah, okay, can come up.
State Energy Office.
Yeah,
To stand on our testimony and support.
all right, thank you. And then next, we have two others in support, and also two more. So a total of 6 in support, 0 opposed. And members, you have questions?
Sure.
Lowen, okay?
So I just realized my questions on the last reso were meant for this one. No one stopped me, but thank you. But maybe really quickly, Energy Office, Maria, I guess similar, what are your thoughts on, similar questions that I asked Dean about geothermal development and how could we ensure that it would first benefit ratepayers if we do further geothermal development in Hawaii and there's all this federal funding coming in from this hydrogen hub application.
Yeah.
That's great. That's all stuff we want to work towards together, but I think it's really important to make sure it maxes out the grids of those islands first. But I'm not really sure where we have control over that.
Yeah, thank you very much. The application, the hydrogen hub application is still under development, and so there's not much being said publicly. On the broader issue of geothermal, that of course is of great interest because it's a potential resource, and especially if it could be matched to the needs, could be very helpful. So to the extent that the production of geothermal is a firm source, base load, is the old term, but now we're looking at, to what
Dispatchable.
extent is it dispatchable? So if it is producing at a constant rate, but our use is going up and down significantly, and we have other renewables on the grid at different times, the value proposition is not a steady state. It really varies by the time of day. So when you have more demand for energy, it's more valuable to serve that load. And when you have less demand for that, and maybe the grid doesn't need it, it could be used for
Yeah, I
other
understand
terms.
that.
So
I
how
just-
we control that, of course, depends on, where it is being developed and who's making the investment, and also what the competing sources are. So that's a lot of stuff to figure out, and we do not have, we don't have a quick, easy soundbite.
Well, I think
type.
it's hard to imagine a scenario
Answer.
where there was a geothermal development that was independent of the state's regulatory process because they had no, contract with the PUC that was just proposing to produce and export hydrogen, or even produce hydrogen and then propose to sell it as stored energy.
Yeah, so the combined
So
factors.
it's hard to
yeah.
imagine that scenario would work out in a way that is to the, that without any kind of mix of some part goes to the electric grid and then the part that's not, not when it's not needed producing hydrogen, or the overproduction producing hydrogen. I don't think that it would be in the benefit of the ratepayers and taxpayers of Hawaii to develop that resource and not first bring the maximum benefit it can bring to the grid.
Okay, thanks. Okay, thank you.
Do you have an opinion on that?
We definitely want the maximum benefit to Hawaii's energy systems. And as you said, it's hard to imagine how these various scenarios that might be proposed will fit together. So, if you need heat as heat and not as electricity, that's a different.
Maria, the State Energy Office
yeah.
asked us to put this resolution in to support your application for the
Yes.
hydrogen hub.
Yes.
So we want to understand that the State Energy Office also is interested, in pursuing this application and also making sure that we're putting the people of Hawaii and the residents of the state and the ratepayers and taxpayers first.
Yes, the public good, of course.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So you just
I
sound
have
very
no
non-committal.
objection to doing what makes sense from the public good, if that's what you're looking for.
So in
Yeah.
light of this hydrogen hub application, were it granted, the State Energy Office would be kind of what the state lead on some of the state role that
Mhm.
would be played in that. I mean, can you commit that in so far as that work is ongoing, that these considerations will be on the table and of importance.
Yes, I'm sure they are.
Okay, all right, thanks. Okay.
Okay, no problem. And I think that, let's see. All right, and if there's no further questions, we can go on to next item, HCR-109, HR-115, right? Is that right? And first up on Zoom, it looks like Department of Health is on Zoom.
Good morning, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Cochran, and Representative Peruso. My name is Michael Burke. I'm with the Department of Health, and we submitted written comments on this resolution. Stand on our written comments, and I am available for questions if you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Department of Health. And next up on Zoom, Hawaii Iron Workers Stabilization Fund, Clyde Hayashi on Zoom.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning. Good morning, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Cochran, members of the committee. I'm testifying on behalf of T. George Paris and the Hawaii Iron Workers Stabilization Fund. I hope you received our testimony. We are particularly concerned about the severe negative effects that the PVT landfill has had on the Nanapuli community. A CDC study has determined that the two census tracts surrounding PVT have reduced life expectancies of 10 years, less than the state average. We are hoping and working for better solid waste processing, which will hopefully lead to not having a landfill like PVT, which sits directly next to the Nanapuli community. We see that if more efficient and effective processing of solid waste would benefit the entire state. We see the increased use of waste-to-energy technology as an alternative to solid waste going into our landfills. H-Power has had that effect in the city and county of Honolulu. All four counties struggle with waste processing. I know that there have been some informal discussions between the counties about coordinating waste processing, solid waste processing, and we see that the Office of Solid Waste, Department of Health Office of Solid Waste Management is being in a good position to be the facilitator, to begin a discussion and a study of how the counties can work together to utilize waste-to-energy and waste-to-energy technology. They could hopefully be part of bring the stakeholders to the table. This would require shipping waste between islands. And that is that is our hope that what this resolution will bring about. Mahalo for the opportunity to testify.
Mahalo for your time. And let's see, next. And another sent written in support. Anyone else here wanting to testify on this measure? Seeing none. Members, any questions, comments? And welcome, Rep. Ward. Aloha, good morning.
Thank you, that's never happened before.
Oh, well, just want to acknowledge your presence.
I acknowledge you as the chair now, too. That
Thank
hasn't
you.
happened before.
Thank you.
you.
Yes, first time. Okay. Chair Lowen, any? No, okay, all right, let's move on to the next measure then. That would be HCR-117, HR-122. And it looks like no one currently signed up for testimony. Anyone present in the room would like to sign up for testimony? Well, if not, there's no one here to ask questions of. But we do have looks like four in support, 0 oppositions. And moving on. Aloha, Representative Kahaloa. Good morning. So, next item on agenda is HCR-124, HR-125. And it looks like in person to testify is Matthew Geyer. Good morning, Mr. Geyer.
Aloha, I'm Matthew Geyer.
Sorry.
I'm with Hawaii Environmental Change Agents Carbon Cashback Task Force. And I'd like to highlight one of the benefits of pricing carbon and sending it back to the people in equal shares. One of the problems we've faced since the beginning with the environmental movement is the fossil fuel industry putting the problem on people by saying, hey, check out your carbon footprint. Look at what you are doing as individuals to cause the problem. And they do that so that we don't look and see what big industry, military, big businesses are doing to the environment. No one's out there saying, let's make big businesses zero waste, right? They're saying individuals need to go zero waste. No one's out there saying, let's flight shame the military. They're flight shaming individuals. And no one's really checking on keeping track of how much fossil fuels they're using. They're trying to get us into EVs. And while it's important for individuals to take action, we need big business, military, and government to take action as well. And one of the benefits of pricing carbon is that they will have to pay more too, but the money goes back to individuals. So this becomes very progressive. It helps low-income families. It helps middle-income families. Even upper middle-income families generally see a benefit from this program. So this is for a national one. I hope you'll support. Thank you for hearing this resolution, and I really appreciate all you guys do for the environment. Aloha.
Thank you, Mr. Geyer. And let's see, who else is signed up? We have quite a few written in support. Next up, looks like on Zoom, Paul Bernstein on Zoom signed up for testimony.
Yes.
Good
Aloha,
morning.
Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Cochran, other members of the EEP committee. Stand on my written testimony. Would just like to add one thing, if I may. This policy is endorsed by thousands of economists. It's very popular with them because of its efficiency, equity provisions, what have you, but it also has wide-ranging support throughout many different groups, from religious groups with Pope Francis to various civic leaders, including our own Brian Schatz and Kai Kahele, as well as Bernie Sanders, environmental groups such as the Nature Conservancy, Environmental Defense Fund, it also the national academies, the three national academies, science, health, and I'm trying to blank on the third one, engineering, and then also from the business community in terms of the Business Roundtable and the Chamber of Commerce. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bernstein. Next person to sign up via Zoom is a Noel Morin. Noel Morin
Yes,
on Zoom.
I'm here.
Aloha.
Good morning.
Good
Good morning, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Cochran, and members of this committee. My name is Noel Morin, an advocate for our community and environment. And I must disclose that I do work for Citizens Climate Lobby. It's a national nonprofit advocating for climate policy. We support healthy forests, building efficiency, permitting reform, and also a national price on carbon. I stand by my written testimony in support of these resolutions. And I'd like to emphasize 2 points. And that is, one, it's inevitable. Our major trading partners have implemented carbon pricing, Canada, the European bloc. And at some pricing level, they will start to introduce carbon border adjustments, essentially to level the playing field and support and protect their local businesses from imports coming from countries without a tax on carbon. Further, a national carbon fee and dividend policy complements other policies. It helps to boost regulations or allow us to rely less on them. And it also helps to ensure that incentives to promote solutions to decarbonize are truly reducing carbon. So a national carbon fee and dividend policy will not only allow us to lead our fight for our climate, it'll actually enable the various actions that are required to make that happen globally. Please support these resolutions, and thank you very much for this opportunity.
Mahalo for your testimony. Next person signed up looks like Mr. Douglas Hagan.
Good morning, aloha,
Good morning.
Chair Lowen and Vice Chair Cochran and members of the committee. Thank you for agreeing to hear this resolution. I'm a volunteer with the CCL chapter here in Maui, and in 2019, Maui County Council unanimously passed a resolution similar to this one in support of carbon fee and dividend federal legislation. I know you folks have heard a lot about carbon fee and dividend and carbon pricing. I just want to reiterate that IPCC calls out 618 times that carbon pricing is the most effective way to fight carbon emissions and climate change. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Hagan. And that was the last person, looks like, to sign up for testimony. Anyone here in the room wanting to testify? Seeing none.
Yes, Vice Chair Cochran,
Oh,
I would like
yes.
to, if I can.
Yes, hello, state your name.
Yeah, my name is Ron, last name is Riley, and I'm a co-state coordinator with Citizens Climate Lobby and stand on written testimony. So I want to thank Chair Lowen and you, Vice Chair Cochran, and committee members for this hearing today. And just to add a couple of emphasis here, I think we should all be proud of the steps that Hawaii has taken in climate leadership. And one of the things that I'm most proud of is the Mauna Loa Observatory and the fact that since 1958, they have been providing gold standard data on atmospheric concentrations of greenhouse gases. I mean, gold standard worldwide. Everybody looks to us right here on Hawaii Island and the Mauna Loa Observatory. So I think the fact that we have this standing, and coupled with the fact that Hawaii has recognition and influence even beyond the Keeling curve, we can positively influence federal action and by extension, global action. And I would just conclude by saying, if you folks are able to get this resolution passed in the House with the concurrence of the Senate, you will be an excellent company, along with, as Douglas Hagan mentioned, Maui, but also California Assembly and Senate passed a similar resolution. So thank you very much for the opportunity to testify.
And thank you very much for your time. Anyone else here to testify or on Zoom? Seeing none. I want to notate this item had 32 items of support, 1 in opposition. So next, any questions, comments?
Chair, I have a question.
Yes, Rep. Ward.
With the other chair's permission.
Of course.
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
go ahead.
she's running the show. Yeah.
Is the Carbon Cashback Task Force, is that person, is that you, Mr. Geyer?
Yes.
Okay, terrific. I love your diagram where it says you get charge a fee on the fossil fuel, then it goes to, I guess that's the Treasury in the middle, the icon.
Sure.
And then it goes to the people. What's the actual mechanics on how cash in and cash out on the guy in the street? How does that person understand what this proposes?
The mechanics of how it works, honestly, that's not really that important. We want to get this passed, so the number one thing is to put a fee on fossil fuels. Tax these fossil fuel companies that have been charging us crazy amounts of money for fossil fuels. Tax them, give that money to the people. And
that's my question. How do they give it to the people? That's the mechanics I'm asking about.
We would love any kind of way you can get it to the people.
Okay.
So, give it to them with a credit card, give it to them with a check, give it to them tax credit. It doesn't really matter from our perspective. Whatever legislatively is easiest to pass is the way we would prefer.
Because
just
if we
get
don't
that
have
price on the fossil fuels, give the money back to the people however we can.
If we don't have a mechanism, the cost of living is going to increase. That's my concern. And that's where a lot of people are saying, well, we're going to phase out fossil fuel, but let's do it in a timely way that it's not going to cost an arm and a leg.
Yes, you absolutely have to have a mechanism, for sure. That is critical. I don't support just a plain carbon price where you just
Okay.
tax it and keep the money for the government to spend however it wants.
Thank you, Mr. Geyer. Mr.
right.
Riley, are you
Well-
still there? May I ask him if he knows the mechanics?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Do you have
Yeah.
the mechanics as to how this goes from one pocket to the other?
Yeah, I do, sir. And the details are very clearly spelled out in a dividend household study, which Citizens Climate Lobby nationally commissioned some year or two ago,
Could
and
you
I'll be glad to
summarize
get that to you.
Could you summarize it? If you
Yes,
paraphrase
I
it?
think I can. The examples that I would give is how the federal government was able to extremely quickly send out COVID funding to the whole U.S. population in checks that were silently deposited into your bank account. So that was one example recently of how brilliantly effective the federal government can distribute money to U.S. citizens when they choose to do so. And the Treasury and the IRS are more than capable of doing this.
Okay, I've got the mechanism. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. Thank you, Mr. Ward. Any further discussion, comments? Okay, then we shall move to the next item on the agenda, which is HCR 189 and HR 194. And at this time, there's no one signed up for testimony, and therefore no one to ask questions of. And no written testimony too at this time. So moving on to the next item is HCR 191, HR 196. And in person to testify is Lyle Tenjoma, individual. Aloha, please come up to the podium.
Thank you for having me. I'll be really quick as much as I can. I'm Lyle Tenjoma. I'm a 40-year health professional in the healthcare industry. I also speak Japanese, and I watch Japanese TV every night for 40 years. Okay, and my first one statement is this issue of dumping radioactive wastewater from the meltdown into the Pacific is a huge science problem, but it's trying to be solved by bureaucrats. My second statement or question would be, is in trying to bridge the gap between bureaucrats and science is the reason I'm here. I'm not saying I'm a nuclear scientist, but I know enough science for a lifetime in it. So what I propose is, I want you committee members to ask me the most burning questions you want somebody to answer, 2 or 3 of them, because that's what I'm here for. I don't know if I can answer them, but I'll try. And number 3 is, the whole process that's being administered in Japan, not by the US, is entirely Japanese, is everything is unilateral. And I brought this prop here, which is a yardstick. But this is the Japanese yardstick. It's totally obfuscated every step of the way by design. And what we get fed by the media and the government, including our federal government, is they're thinking it looks like this. I have a judge in the family. I know judicial processes. I'm a doctor, but I'm not a lawyer. But I understand the word obfuscation because that's what lawyers and people in judicial face every day. And it's not only one misdeed. It's a series all in a row. And that's what we face. But I'm here to try and clear that up. But I'll say one more thing. If if you want to ask me some questions, but I'll say one more thing before that. And what it is as an educator, I mentor and I teach young doctors. And of course, to do that, you have to ask very pointed questions to get them, to teach them. But that's not the telling thing. The telling thing as an educator or a mentor is the questions that they don't ask. That's the most telling thing, and that's how an educator thinks. So having said that, I want you to ask me anything. I'll answer as best I can, but I'm not an oceanographer, I'm a doctor.
Thank you, Dr. Tanjoma.
No
And-
questions?
Well, I'm continuing, I'm gonna see if there's anyone else for testimonies, and so, thank you. And I'll state that Hawaii Reef and Ocean Coalition is in support. We have multiple individuals, total of 34 support, 6 in opposition, and 2 with comments. Anyone else, either on Zoom or in person, would like to testify on this measure? Seeing none. Members?
Yes,
at this
yes, I
sorry.
would.
There is someone on Zoom, yes?
Yes.
Aloha.
I submitted written testimony. My name is Bob Richmond. I'm a research professor and director of the Kewalo Marine Laboratory at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. And I submitted testimony, both written for their 2 resolutions within this committee. Just to give a brief overview, I'm one of 5 scientists that was engaged by the Pacific Island Forum, 16 Pacific Island nations plus Australia and New Zealand, to serve on a independent scientific panel for the review of the Japanese plans to release the treated water into the Pacific. And as a member of the committee that's been working on this for the last 15 months, I really applaud the members of this committee, the leadership, for putting forward this resolution. There are so many scientific questions that have not been adequately addressed. I was in Japan 3 weeks ago in support of the Pacific Island Forum Secretariat, the Prime Minister of the Cook Islands as the delegate head, and a minister from the Marshall Islands. And it still remains very concerning that key questions about the safety, about the validity of the data, about the adequacy and the accuracy remain. And the 5 of us on the scientific panel are unanimous in our concern to say that this is not ready to go forward. So the resolutions that are being presented to ask for the halt is very appropriate. It's scientifically backed. This is truly a transboundary issue. It's a shared Pacific Ocean. And we know from the Fukushima incident that within the same year it occurred, tuna that were caught off of California were detected with cesium from this event. Levels were low, but it will affect the entire Pacific. It's also transgenerational. The plan is to release this water for at least 40 years. So my generation, my daughter's generation, and any generation beyond that. And that, just to put it in perspective, when it comes to nuclear incidents, there's a rating scale from 0 to 7, 1 to 7. There have only been 2 that are in category 7. The first was Chernobyl, and the second one is Fukushima. Fukushima is about 1/10 of the radionuclide release is what was experienced in Chernobyl, but unlike Chernobyl, this is very much a marine issue. So I would simply like to thank the members of the committee, the leadership, and those who proposed it. I remain at your service. I'm at Kewalo Marine Lab, just down the street from you guys. I would be happy to answer any questions, work with any of the members, but I strongly support, and the science strongly supports, the resolution to ask the Japanese government to halt any movement forward on the release until such a time as they can provide the data necessary to, in fact, ensure the safety, which they clearly have not done. Thank you so much for your time and your efforts.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Richmond was the last person to sign up to testify. Anyone else here in the room wanting to testify? Seeing none. Members, any questions? Yes, Rep. Ward?
The good doctor, please.
Hello, Representative Ward.
You've acted.
By the way, I'm familiar with Dr. Richmond.
Okay, I have 2 doctors in front of me.
Wow, go ahead.
The first question is, what's the size and the weight of the water that they're going to release? And I know this is not the
Volume-wise,
first
they have 1.2 million tons. That equals to 1,200 big fuel tanks of it that they've claimed they're processed. and I say claimed. That's why Dr. Richmond has said we have no verification of what their process has done to this water, but they got 1.2 million tons right now, which they're gonna dump into the ocean. But you know, there's really unclear things. Is that this nuclear cleanup of their mess is gonna take 30 to 50 years, of which they're gonna keep dumping 30 to 50 years worth. It's not only one time. That's the part that nobody gets.
Give me the size again.
1.2 million tons of theoretically coolant water that's flowing over the melted down reactor to keep it from fissioning anymore and turning into a huge
How
problem.
many Red Hill fuel tanks is that?
1,200 at this point. It might be 13 at this point. Over 12 years, well, let's say 11 years of accumulation.
So those are huge. By the way, thank you for your visual aid and your diplomacy of saying that obfuscation only takes place in the judiciary as well as with lawyers.
It's
Nobody
everywhere.
in this building has ever obfuscated you
It's
at
a
all.
word of the night of 2021. It's the word of the year for me, obfuscation.
The word of the year, okay.
For me.
The most serious question. Do you watch Dr. X, Michiko Diamond in Japanese
do.
TV?
That's one of my favorite things.
One of my favorite
We
also.
do have
This is
people
really
waiting to
off-center. This is
testify.
I watch TV.
I just
With
wanted to
him
see
since
Japanese.
I wanted to see how
9:30.
thorough and honest he was watching Japanese TV, because that's my wife's favorite television program. Thank you, sir.
Maybe after the
Yes.
hearing.
I'm available after the meeting because I can keep talking forever. And you really need to get
Thank
informed
you.
as a non-scientist.
Thank
That's-
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As Rep Ward can too. But moving on, next item on our, without further comments, questions, let's move on to our next item, which is HCR 192 and HR 197. All right, so hang on, let's see. And we have Hawaii Department of Health and Support. We have in-person
Why-
testimony.
Oh, no, they,
Sorry.
never mind, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, we have Leah Laramie in person here. No, not here. And we have an individual in opposition, and Blue Planet in support, Melissa Miyashiro.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm testifying on behalf of Blue Planet Foundation. I'm Jody Robinson, the policy analyst. Apologies, Melissa couldn't make it. We're in strong support of this resolution. When we think about climate change, a lot of times we think about the impacts to infrastructure, built infrastructure in our economy. It's been a growing need to really address the human health impacts of this crisis that we're facing. So we strongly support this resolution and funding and support for the Climate Change Commission to do this important outreach work. Thank you.
Thank you. And sorry, let me read the item. So it's urging the Hawaii Climate Change Mitigation and Adaptation Commission to develop a proactive and comprehensive communication strategy to educate Hawaii's residents about the health impacts of climate crisis. And so with that, I'm not showing anyone else. Yeah, no one. Is there anyone else here to testify on the measure? Yes, please come on up to the podium. It looks like we have two other individuals.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Chair Lowen, co-chair, and representatives. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Kiefer. I'm a physician and an assistant clinical professor at John A. Burns School of Medicine, and I'm here to support the resolution. In addition to my internal medicine training, I have a master's in epidemiology and public health, and I completed specific coursework on specifically for health professionals to address climate change and the adverse health impacts. And since I've completed that training, I've been educating physicians about these health impacts through classes and presentations. And so we really examine how heat, flooding, and food insecurity can affect our patients' respiratory health, cardiovascular health, or even susceptibility to infection or obesity. And it's really important for the public to be educated about these risks as well and to make these sorts of connections to stay out of the hospital in the first place. And as physicians, we really want our public, we want mothers to say it's a high heat day, there's high humidity, low wind, so I know that this is a trigger for my child's asthma. So I'm going to take precautions to keep them out of the emergency room, out of a full-blown respiratory attack. And so this education and communication strategy really can improve the health of the people in Hawaii, and I really support this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we have another one. Yes, Aloha.
Aloha, thank you. This is my first time giving testimony, so thank you very much. My name is Krista Heiser. I'm a professor at Kapiolani Community College, and I've worked with the University of Hawaii System for Sustainability across the curriculum. I'm a senior advisor for sustainability curriculum for the Global Council for Science and the Environment. So the area of climate education in general is of deep concern to me in how we prepare next generations for the climate impacts that will affect their futures. Regarding the comprehensive strategy for teaching the public about the health impacts of climate change, I support this measure. Some of these health impacts include disease vectors, heat, and the one that is the most frightening to me is the chemical changes to the makeup of food. So nutritional impacts through food scarcity and the actual chemical makeup of food with the increased carbon in the atmosphere. We are grappling with these things across the curriculum, both in higher ed and in K-12, how to teach young people about these issues. A big obstacle to this educational effort in schools is the cognitive dissonance that is created when the public does not understand these issues. So a comprehensive strategy in the public would really help us to educate young people in classrooms, K-12 and in college. So I want to say two more things about this. One is I did a research paper called Worry and Hope, What College Students Know, Think, Feel, and Do About Climate Change. And I want to highlight the mental health impacts of climate change, which are described in the bill. This is a very serious issue in our young people, and a comprehensive strategy can include research on how to deliver information that is age and context appropriate. It's not just about more information. It's about delivering a consistent message delivered consistently by a trusted messenger, and that includes teachers, that includes healthcare professionals. There are strategies to communicate this information in an empowering way that helps students and young people feel confident and excited about their future. And if we do not do it well, then we risk a true mental health crisis, youth suicide, depression, existential dread about the future. All of these things are very real in our young people, and I think that this bill would really help. Thank you.
Thank you. And let's see, anyone else here wanting to testify? Yes, Mr. Geyer.
Aloha, Matt Geyer, Hawaii Environmental Change Agents. I can't top any of their testimony, so I'll just testifying as an individual in support.
Okay, thank you for that. And with that, anyone on Zoom wanting to testify? Seeing none. Members, any questions, comments? Mr. Rep Ward.
Thank you, Madam. The last professor,
Surprising.
where is she? Oh, there she is. Interesting impact of climate change on the mental abilities or adjustment of the young people. My question is rather academic in the sense, have there been any comparisons with the mutually assured destruction of an earlier generation and that mental impact of, well, the world's going to blow up with a nuclear bomb versus what now is the climate change, which is a little bit slower in its process?
Yes, sir, that's an astute comparison. It's the existential threat confronting this generation. My generation grew up in that mutually assured destruction of the Cold War, which is also still with us. But this is...
But are there metrics on that one? But I know it was basically well known, but the metrics of actually, hey, like you did with the climate change, is there something comparable?
Probably there is. I don't have that research at the ready, but there's a growing body of research on the mental health impacts of climate change and existential threat to young people's future.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. Yes, Chair Lowen.
Sure, Dr. Kiefer. Mostly, I just want to thank you for coming out to testify and for the info briefing you did before session started for this committee, which if you haven't watched, everyone should go watch it. But I guess to Rep. Ward's question, maybe you want to respond to that as well and talk a little bit about the mental health impacts as well.
Yeah, we know it is referred colloquially as eco-grief, and it is the phenomena of depression, anxiety, even trauma related to a growing sense of fear and worry about the climate crisis and the inability to see that there's any effective change coming up. And so it's really affecting our young people and something that we worry about as well.
Thank you. And then just a quick thank you also to the coming out to testify for your first time. That's all.
Yes,
Thanks, Chair.
okay, great. Thank you for everyone's participation. Alrighty, moving next on to HCR, let's see, 193 and HR 198. This is urging the governor and state departments to investigate opportunities provided by the direct pay provision in the Inflation Reduction Act that allows for direct payment of clean energy incentives to state government entities for the cost of installing solar energy systems in state facilities. So first up, we have on Zoom, Hawaii State Energy Office, Mark Glick in support. Oh, sorry, we're in person here live. Okay, great. Thank you, Maria. Also in person, State of Hawaii Climate Change Mitigation Adaptation Commission, Coordinator Leah Laramie, not present. Okay, and anyone else here that may want to? Yes, Blue Planet.
Thank you, Vice Chair, Chair, members of the committee. Jody Robinson with Blue Planet. Apologies, we submitted late testimony, but in strong support of this measure. The state agencies in their buildings consume about $173 million worth of electricity annually. So there's a huge opportunity here with federal funding to come down and leverage that so that we can reduce our electricity bills for the state taxpayers, cut our energy waste, and also address climate change emissions. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here wanting to testify in person or on Zoom at this time? Seeing none, let me notate that we have Hawaii Green Infrastructure Authority in support, DAGS in support, 350 Hawaii in support, and Hawaii Solar Energy Association also in support. Members, any questions, comments? All right, seeing none. Looks like our final item on agenda is HCR 196, HR 201. This is urging the government of Japan to halt its plans to dump wastewater from the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant into the Pacific Ocean. And I want to notate this is obviously very similar to what we already had discussed, HCR 189, HR 194. So at this time, I'd like to notate that if you had already testified on that other item, please state, that you'll stand on your written testimony on this item and be available for questioning, just so we can, move forward, since they are very, very similar in nature and its intended goal. So at this time, let's see, who do I have? I have Dr. Richmond here on Zoom to testify.
Thanks very much, Chair Lowe, Vice Chair Cochran, and members of the committee. I stand on my written testimony and previous oral testimony.
Thank you very much, Doctor. And the other signed up is Linda Williams on Zoom. Not present. In person, Anthony Allen, not present either. Let's see, the other pages. One second. Okay, all right, so that looks like all the people that did sign up to testify. And at this time, is there anyone present here?
I realize it's the same thing.
Right, yes,
Something
sir.
I wanna add to it.
Okay, then that's fine. Come on up and you can add to your previous testimony. Thank you, Doctor.
Anyway, thank you, Doc, over there. Anyway, what I want to add is, I want you all, as legislators in this, to work with your Senate President, your House Speaker of
Can you please testify on the measure? This is where
this
you
one.
want to testify on-
191 is the original one, but this is a different number, but it's the same.
Yes, but please tell us, you know, support it and your thoughts on the measure and not what you think we should do outside of what's in the resolution.
Well, if we don't do anything now, we're 11:59 on the clock. And it's not only us, it's all of the Pacific. So I want Alaska, California, Oregon, Washington, they're all going to suffer the same things. Their fisheries are going to be wiped out. And no one seems to care about that. End of my story. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. And anyone here have any comments, questions?
You have a question?
Yes, okay, Mr. Rep. Let's go with Chair Lowen first, then then Rep. Ward.
Dr. Richmond, between these, there's two resolutions basically on the same subject. I don't know if you've read each one thoroughly, but do you have a preference for one over the other, or is there certain aspects? You know, I think one has a little more language in it than the other. Do you think they're both equivalent, or do you have a preference?
Yeah, I think the main point is that they address the key question and the responsibility to ask Japan to halt. So I think, as you say, the first one has a little bit more language to it, but the two of them can be merged. I think that's the appropriate action that's recommended in both resolutions, to halt any forward movement on the release of the contaminated water until such a time that is proven to be safe. So once again, my thanks to the committee, to those that put it together. It's very important, very timely, and a very valuable asset to efforts to try to get things on a better track.
Okay, thank you. And Representative Ward, you had?
Chair, that was my exact question, except I wanted to specify that one of the resolutions says temporarily halt, the other one says halt. That to me is a big, big difference, that one word. Which, do you prefer temporary in or temporary out?
The reason why we're still asking the question is, good scientists, we're data driven. So we're going in to see whether or not they can substantiate their claims of safety, which they have not yet done. If at some point they can demonstrate that they can do it effectively and safely, then I think the scientific community would back it. At this point, it hasn't occurred, so your point is exactly correct. Honestly, I think removing temporarily would be my preference.
So you prefer the one that says in its title temporarily halt? Is that what I've heard, or the opposite?
I would say that one is fine if you remove the temporarily. The temporarily makes the assumption that at some point it could be redone. So I say I would ask the one without temporarily.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks for that. It's very important.
Okay. Thank you, Doctor. And then thank you, Representative Ward. I'll notate that Friends of Hanama Bay is in support, Animal Welfare Institute for Fishes is in support, Hawaii Reef and Ocean Coalition in support, Hawaii Public Health Association in support, and SGI-USA, Lloyd Fischel, in support. And total of 11 support, 1 opposition. At this time, members, without further discussion or testimonies on the item, we shall recess for decision-making. reconvening the Committee of Energy and Environmental Protection, 9:30 a.m. agenda for decision-making. And first item is HCR 3, and members will be deferring this item at this time. And I do agree with Department of Health's concerns on this, and so therefore deferral. All right, and Chair for the vote?
We don't have to vote because we deferred it.
Oh, we deferred
Just
it.
move to the next.
Oh, got it, okay.
That would be
Okay,
our hold.
next item on the agenda is HCR 17 and HR 20, and recommendation is to pass as is. All right. Members, any questions, comments, concerns at this time? Seeing none, Chair Lowen for the vote.
All right, we are voting on HCR 17 and HR 20 together. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Rep. Gates?
Aye.
Rep. Kahaloa?
Aye.
Rep. Peruso?
Aye.
Rep. Woodson?
Aye.
Rep. Ward?
Aye.
Recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much. And next item is HCR 35, HR 37. Recommendation is to pass as is. Members, any questions, comments, concerns at this time? Seeing none, Chair Lowen for the vote.
All right, we are voting on HCR 35, HR 37. Recommendation is to pass unamended, noting all members present. Are there any noes or reservations? Seeing none, recommendation adopted.
Thank you. Now moving on to HCR 109, HR 115. This one we shall be passing with amendments on page 1, line 27 through 29. We'll delete this whereas clause. On page 2, line 2, we're going to delete the word promising. On page 2, line 40, insert, quote, subject to the availability of funding, end quote, after the word section. Also, page 2, line 40, delete, quote, develop a plan of initiatives, end quote, and change to, quote, investigate strategies, end quote. Page 3, line 5, insert, quote, subject to the availability of funding, end quote, after the word section. Page 3, line 26, delete, quote, including any proposed legislation, and end quote. So members, that's the amendments to this. At this time, any questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, Chair Lowen for the vote.
All right, we are voting on HCR 109, HR 115, recommendation to pass with amendments, noting all members present. Any noes or reservations? Seeing none, recommendation adopted.
Thank you. Moving on to HCR 117, HR 122. Recommendation is to pass as is. And at this time, questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, Chair Lowen for the vote.
Voting on HCR 117 and HR 122, recommendation to pass unamended, noting all members present. Are there any noes or reservations? Seeing none, recommendation adopted.
Thank you. Next item is HCR 124, HR 125, and this also to pass as is. So members, any questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none. Oh, Mr. Rep. Ward?
Reservations, I'm still waiting for more data and clarification, so with reservations.
Okay, Rep. Ward with reservations. Anyone else? Okay, Chair Lowen for the vote.
All right, voting on HCR 124 and HR 125, noting all members present and reservations of Rep. Ward. Are there any other noes or reservations? Seeing none, recommendation adopted.
Thank you very much. And next item, HCR 189, HR 194. Recommendation is to defer. And then moving to next item, the HCR 191, HR 196. This one, members, also is to defer. While I completely support the intent of this resolution, there's another vehicle we'll be voting on later on agenda that I feel is a better vehicle and that will reach the same intent and goal. So that's the reason for deferment. Next item is HCR 192, HR 197. As is. Any questions, comments, concerns, members on this? Seeing none, Chair Lowen for the vote.
All right, voting on HCR 192, HR 197, recommendation to pass unamended, noting all members present. Are there any noes or reservations? Seeing none, recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much. Moving to next, HCR 193, HR 198, recommendation to pass as is. Any questions, comments, concerns on the item? Seeing none, Chair Lowen for the vote.
Voting on HCR 193 and HR 198, recommendation is to pass unamended. Noting all members present, are there any noes or reservations? Seeing none, recommendation adopted.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, HCR 196, HR 201, recommendation is to pass with amendments. And on page 3, lines 15 through 18 to be deleted. And with that, members, any questions, comments, concerns on the item? Seeing none, Chair Lowen for the vote.
All right, voting on HCR 196 and HR 201, the recommendation is to pass with amendments. Noting all members present, any noes or reservations? No. All right, seeing none, recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. With
Chair,
that,
before,
sorry,
be-
Ms.
before we
Ward.
adjourn, can we thank the Vice Chair for a good job today?
Good job, Vice Chair.
Thank
Good
you.
job. Yay.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank
With
my
only
chair
one
and my
interruption.
staff and the powers that be to make it
But
happen.
with
So,
only-
and all of you for being here. So thank you, members. This meeting is adjourned.